Do you need RAW? That's a good question, and I think it's a question that a lot of people don't genuinely or critically answer for themselves. A lot of people are getting really excited nowadays because we're getting all these powerful features in relatively affordable cameras, RAW or ProRes or high frame rate or whatever the cool feature might be. But I wrote a blog post about this in regards to the Atomos Shogun and just in regards to ProRes. But I found more people who are really excited for the raw capabilities of cameras, whether it's a 5D Mark III with the Magic Lantern hack, or even the Ursa Mini or Ursa or the Sony FS7, whatever the camera might be. If it can record RAW or ProRes, you're looking at file sizes that are 2, 3, 4, 5 times, 6 times. I mean, it is infinitely expandable, especially if you're looking at a camera like a Phantom or something with shooting high frame rates. But let's set even that aside. Let's just talk about just RAW. You're looking at data rates that grow significantly. And not only are the cameras usually more expensive, but the hard drives to store this information gets really expensive really fast. And there are a lot of productions that you're not just using one camera, you're using two or maybe even three. And it's not like you're getting specific shots that you've storyboarded out in advance. You're filming an interview and it might be an hour long, it might be 2 hours long. You don't know. And so it's really hard to plan and budget for these things in advance when you're doing stuff that's, oh, we're just going to go film B-roll for the day. Or, oh, we're going to film this concert. Or, oh, we're going to do this interview. And these are really long format projects. And when you start recording RAW, especially across multiple cameras, you're now looking at terabytes of data just to get the footage. Then you got to go worry about editing it later and all the other files and assets that you need to fit on that same hard drive, or that cluster of hard drives more likely. So it really is an important question to ask yourself. Do you need RAW? I've found myself many times being really excited about cameras and being like, oh, I can shoot RAW. This is so great and this is awesome. And there are specific instances where you'd want that. Maybe it's a short film or a feature film or a commercial or a smaller project where okay, we have these 10 shots that we need to get. But there's just the same, the other projects where maybe it's a wedding or, like I said, a concert or an interview, and you're eating up hard drive after hard drive after hard drive just to store your footage. And then you're likely not even editing the raw stuff. You're probably making proxies or other files to edit and then reconform later on. So you're adding more and more data in the editing process. And it's really appealing, the power of RAW and being able to edit and tweak your footage exactly the way you want. But for those long format projects, usually you don't need RAW. And that might be hard for some people to swallow. It might be controversial, but I've found that the smaller file sizes, obviously you want the best quality possible. That is ideal on any project. So if you have the budget for it, by all means, go shoot RAW, do your thing, spend the money. It's fine. But in the real world, most of us are dealing with budgets, whether they're big or small, and that money has to get allocated somewhere. Do you want to spend a good chunk of it just on holding your footage? That you really have to weigh that. It's an expense that a lot of people don't consider up front. And in the workflow is slower, and that's time, and time is money. So there's a lot of components that can end up making shooting RAW much more expensive. And I've found that the smaller file sizes on like the GH4, for example, or even shooting like ProRes 422 Lite, if you were to go that route via like an Atomos Shogun or something like that, that might be better suited to what you're doing. But you have to have that end product in mind. Okay, do I need this? Because if you're doing a good job and you're shooting your stuff right, if it's lit well and you've got, your white balance and everything set like proper, like you should be doing, oftentimes you don't necessarily need that raw flexibility. It's nice to have, but at what expense? If the footage is 95% of the way there, do you really need that extra 5% and spend 5 times as much because it's 5 times as much data for the raw files? I think a lot of times you don't. And there's this allure of, feature films, they shoot raw, so I should too. But it really doesn't mean extra quality. The real quality comes from lighting and camera movement and set design and wardrobe selection and all the moving pieces that are in the image, not the data that's used to record it. I mean, you can add higher bit rates and you can add more color depth and you can do all those things. And in some cases it is needed, whether you're doing green screen or something like that. But a lot of times you don't need it because you're shooting it the way that it's meant to be shot, the way you're going to finalize or close to it, at least with some flexibility. And most compressed formats, whether it's H.264 or H.265, 420, whatever, that stuff still has a little bit of wiggle room. You can take it into speed grade and play around with it a little bit, not as much as with RAW, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it really is something that you need to consider. I mean, just in photography alone, there are people who swear by JPEG. I'm not one of them. I think for photography, the RAW file sizes, they are much larger than JPEG, but if it's one photo, it's worth it. But when you're talking about 24 frames a second or 60 frames a second or 120 frames a second, that becomes an issue when you're getting a RAW frame 120 times just in a second. So photography, I get it, but with modern hard drives, with the way things are currently, it is really cost prohibitive sometimes to be shooting RAW. And I've fallen into this trap too, where I've wanted to record at the max quality I could. And on a particular project, it was, ProRes 444 or whatever the highest quality was I could do at the time. And that's what we did. And we ended up burning through so much hard drive space just for that one camera that, looking back on it, I would have totally done it different. But that's the thing, right? You learn from your mistakes, you tweak what's working, what's not working, and you use that knowledge moving forward. So if there's anyone out there looking at shooting with these high data rates or with RAW or ProRes or whatever it is, you just have to look at the final product. Do you need it? Because I imagine there's a lot of people who are shooting that way and they're not doing the testing to see if they actually need it or not. Shoot something compressed. It doesn't have to be client work or something that you care about, but just shoot it compressed and see what you think, if it actually is worth it to have that extra data. Because ultimately everything nowadays is getting compressed. Very few people are finalizing in a format that requires that kind of stuff. People talk about compression artifacts and whatnot, and that stuff is inherent to the digital age that we live in. Most people are putting their content on Vimeo or YouTube, or even stuff on Netflix, is compressed just to send it through that pipeline. So don't kid yourself and think that you necessarily need it. Yes, it's good. I'll say it again. It is ideal to have if you have the budget for it. If you're shooting House of Cards, by all means, shoot 6K, 8K, whatever, RAW, do it, if you've got the budget. But if you're an independent solo artist, really consider if you want to hack your Mark III to shoot RAW for everything, because you will pay for it down the road.